Well, former Florida deputy made his first appearance this morning following his arrest for failing to keep students safe during the Parkland school shooting. Scot Peterson, who you see right there at the top right corner of your screen, is charged with child neglect. A judge set his bond at $102,000. CBS News national correspondent Manuel Bojorquez got reaction from some of the parents of the Parkland victims.
It's a step towards more accountability for letting my daughter get murdered.
After more than a year demanding Scot Peterson be held accountable following one of the nation's worst school shootings, loved ones of the 17 students and staff killed at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School expressed some relief on Tuesday.
It's absolutely a nightmare, and this is the only thing we wanted for us, what we've been fighting for.
Fred Gutenberg, whose daughter Jamie died, tweeted following Peterson's arrest, "Rot in hell. You could have saved some of the 17. Lori Alhadef lost her daughter, Alyssa.
It's very painful for me to know that he had a gun. He was supposed to act. He had a duty to act. That was his job.
Peterson was charged following a 15-month investigation. The 56-year-old faces 11 criminal counts, including child neglect, culpable negligence, and perjury. Surveillance footage shows Peterson never confronted the 19-year-old gunman during the February 2018 shooting. Instead, a commission report says he hid for about 48 minutes after the first shots. Peterson could be heard radioing for backup during the rampage.
Make sure we get some units over here. I need to shut down Stoneman Douglas.
There is a difference between cowardice and criminal activity. I think what you found here is there are examples of both.
In an interview a year ago, Peterson said he is not solely responsible.
I never had a chance. I never thought even for a moment of being scared or a coward because I was just doing things the whole time.
That was Manuel Bojorquez reporting. Joining me now on set, Jesse Weber, an attorney and host of the Law and Crime Network. Is this kind of strange? Is it unusual to criminally charge a law enforcement officer like this?
It's really strange. It's very rare, and some analysts have been saying they've never seen a case like this whatsoever. I will tell you, though, no matter what the conclusion of it is, it's good that we're going to get an answer one way or another because, unfortunately, we keep having these shootings. What I will say is there's one thing to hold an officer or an off-duty officer responsible to say, hey, we're going to fire them, we'll suspend them, but to hold someone criminally responsible goes to a whole different kind of degree of responsibility. And here, the law is not necessarily on the state attorney's office, the prosecution. It's more on his side. That's
so interesting to hear you say. You know, the New York Times points this out, saying that the constitutional law, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, does not generally give people a right to expect the police to protect them against harm. Can you explain that?
Isn't that shocking to think about? Really, what police have a constitutional duty to do is to protect those people who are in their custody. That doesn't mean students at a school. It doesn't mean anybody in the public. Generally, what it means is they can choose what to respond to and how do they respond to. And the question here is, well, maybe he's in a different relationship because his sole duty was to protect those kids at that school. And perhaps the court will say, well, he's not like any officer just trying to protect the public, but he had a special relationship to protect these kids, and maybe that's a little different.
What kind of precedent do you think this sets?
Oh, it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge because here's the thing. On one hand, wouldn't you think that somebody who had a weapon could have intervened, maybe made a difference and protected lives, shouldn't be held responsible? Sure. On the other hand is it fair to hold officers responsible? Because then what should they do? What shouldn't they do? Are you going to be in the position to say, well, you didn't fire enough bullets, you didn't rush in quick enough? Because then these officers might be second guessing anytime they're in these kinds of emergency situations. And training is a lot different than an active shooting situation. And you're going to put that in their minds. It creates a very, very difficult question.
So Peterson's attorney says on that neglect charge that he can't be charged because he was not a caregiver.
Right.
Is that a legit?
That's a great argument for them to make, because if you look at the statute, caregiver is usually a parent, a legal guardian, then they have a whole list of other people. But you can make the argument that an officer is specifically excluded from that. Again, though, if he's an employee of the school, he may in fact be a caregiver. So it's an interesting legal question one way or another.
That's interesting. So Peterson's firing and arrest, it came after an investigation from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. The commissioner of the agency said this, and I'm going to quote here: "There can be no excuse for his complete inaction and no question that his inaction cost lives." What do you make of that statement?
It's a powerful statement. I totally get where they're coming from. To hold him responsible, he could be held responsible a number of ways. loses his job,
Right.
he could be found civilly responsible.
Okay.
You know, again, there's lawsuits filed against him. But to hold him criminally responsible is something else. Then again, we keep looking at the culpable negligence and child neglect charges. He's also been charged with perjury. And that's more of a slam dunk kind of case than the other ones. And if you want to hold him responsible, you may not like it as much because, again, if he was convicted across the board, he could face up to 96, 97 years in prison. But perjury is no joke. And I get what happened here. At the same point, we have to be realistic about what the law states and what can ultimately be, how he can ultimately be held responsible. But I get the outrage. I totally understand why this happened.
Yeah. If you're a president or a superintendent of a school, I mean, obviously school safety is hugely important, but from a legal perspective, what do you learn from this entire case?
Warning signs. You know, really have to understand exactly what happened. And the idea that if there were warning signs, that they knew that there could have been a threat, that's really how schools have to take more action. And you can't just blame it on, oh, well, you know, these are just kids talking.
Yeah.
If there's credible threats and you can try to stop something beforehand, it's better to stop it before than playing catch up after. And look, they had an armed security guard. That's one point that for them for what they did. But at the end of the day, how do you prevent this from happening in the best way possible?
Yeah.
And just, you have to talk to children. You have to understand what's happening in a school.
That's such a great point, Jesse Weber. Thank you very much for joining us, Jesse.
Appreciate it.